Welcome back to Take a Side. For our final segment of the day, I'm joined by Sarah Chaffee. Sarah is a mental performance consultant specializing in sports. Sarah, thank you for joining me.
Thanks, Jacob. I'm excited.
Now, for those of you joining us for the first time, I'm going to ask Sarah to take a side on a number of debates from Sided.co, mainly focused on her field. Sarah, you ready to get started?
Oh boy, I think so. Let's go. Whew.
All right, so starting us off, what do you believe is the most important factor in athletic success? Mental performance or physical performance?
Well, that's a great question, Jacob. And obviously, I think both are really important for success. But, there's this great quote that I heard once that said, competition is won or lost on the 6-inch playing field between your ears. So, that's the mental game. And obviously, I believe in the mental game as a mental performance coach who studied sports psychology and really what that can do for an athlete. But I think also LeBron James said it best when he said, everything physical must first be mental. So basically, just how you can have a physical skill set, you can also acquire a mental skill set. And I think it's just as valuable. And what a lot of people don't know is just like you can train your body, you can actually train your mind as well. And this is important because, in sports psychology, we learn, what we think about affects how you feel and how you perform. Okay. So training your mind is just as important as training your body because, so often we really get in our own way and defeat ourselves and sabotage success by what's going on up here in our mind. So whether that's fears, doubts, anxiety, whatever it may be, sometimes we can already take an L up here before we've even gone on the court or the field or wherever your respective sport is played. So really that's where the mental game comes in because it can combat all of those things. And if you train your mind and have these mental skills and strategies that I teach athletes or performers, you're really preparing yourself. And the best in the world, they don't leave their mind up to chance. They train their mind just like they would their craft. But, the good news is you don't have to be an elite level athlete or the world's best to train your mind. We can all train our mind and we can all use these mental skills that we see the best in the world, the Olympians, the professional athletes. We can all use those same skills to be our best in whether it's life or a respective sport. Because essentially, we're all performers to some degree, but you really can't commit to excellence in whatever that you're doing until your mind is prepared to take you there. So train your body, but train your mind with it. Obviously, the mental game isn't a substitute for hard work. You got to train the physical aspect as well. But I'm going to go with the mental side is the most important to begin with because it starts, like I said, LeBron James said it all starts, everything physical starts with the mind first. So training both consistently is a lethal combination, but I'm going to go with the mental game. I'm a big believer in the mental game, Jacob.
Great answer. So when it comes to that training, what do you believe is the number one most important habit that an athlete can learn to improve their mental performance?
Well, here's the thing. This is a little bit tricky because it's very tailored to the specifications of whatever athlete it is. Certainly the mental game is not a one size fit all. So we cannot expect one mental strategy to work the same for every athlete. But, there are certain practices that I think are extremely beneficial, and I've witnessed them be extremely beneficial for every athlete. And if I could choose one, I would probably just say getting the athlete in the present moment. So, a term that we know for that is mindfulness. So why I say this is because we know that high performance from sports psychology, we know high performance only lives in the present moment. Okay. Our mind can be in three places: the past, the present, the future, but our body can only be in one place, and that's the present. And we know for us to be at our best performance-wise, our mind and our body have to be working together. So we want to get our mind in line with our body in the present moment. And so, athletes might be a little confused by this, or performers if they're listening, but what I say often is I challenge athletes to really reflect on a time that Go back to a performance where you weren't thinking, you were just doing. And a lot of athletes say, we call that being in the zone. And there's no hesitation. And I'm sure that every athlete can go to some performance where they were just doing and they weren't thinking. And what that is being fully present and fully absorbed in the moment. And this is important because if you're not fully present in each moment, your energy really becomes diluted and just not as powerful. But in the present moment, you have this heightened, awareness, and you're focused, and you're just performing. You're trusting your stuff and being here now. Kobe Bryant had this great quote where he said, it's not about the number of hours that you practice, but it's actually about the number of hours that your mind is present for the practice. Because so often, whether it might be life or performing or sports, whatever it is, we go through the motions and we're not fully present. And we know that, sometimes our energy is wasted because we're just checking boxes off, but we're not fully there. So when we're fully present in the moment, we're completely focused on what's important now, what's happening now, versus being distracted by thinking about what happened in the past or worried about what might happen in the future. That both of those thinking patterns are just not productive to what we're doing right now in the present moment. So it's very important to get in the present moment, but, it's very easy said, a lot easier said than done, so athletes always say, well, how do I get in the present moment? Well, there's a variety of different ways. Certainly our breath is one of those tools that can help us get back into the present moment. So if we find that our mind is taking us in all sorts of directions, we can certainly utilize our breath, taking a deep breath in, letting it out, as a reminder to, hey, let's get back here in this moment right now. So certainly the breath can serve as a bridge to the present moment. Some athletes I work with, will take a breath and combine it with a saying like, be here now, or be where your feet are. So, this can also work like if you're taking a test at school, or if you're on the job at work and you're worried about a variety of different things outside of your control, or whatever it may be, taking a deep breath and saying, hey, be where your feet are. Where are you right now? Be here. Other athletes, I know a lot of professional athletes that have something written on their wrists or wherever it may be, or their hockey stick or wherever, and they look down at it and it has some kind of reminder on there. Whether, I know one guy says play present, another guy has a saying, a different kind of saying, another guy says, be where your feet are. But what that does is that's a tangible reminder to look down at, and it serves as that reminder to refocus. Hey, I caught myself wandering, refocus, get back into that present moment. And then you might see some professional athletes like picking up grass and letting it blow into the wind, or focusing on one focal point in front of them. There's so many different things, tons of different tactics to get your mind reset, almost like a recalibration and a reset to get you back to that present moment, and really absorbed in what's happening now. So kind of went on a tangent there, but I think what's really most important is if you're not here right now, we miss out on so much because we're so focused on things that aren't even happening or taking place right now. All of our energy goes there, and we can't be our best for ourselves and for our team, whatever it may be, in this moment. So, our best lives in the present and the present moment only. So being here now and being able to find your mind wandering and get it refocused back into that present moment is probably what I would say one of the most beneficial habits or tactics that athletes can use to get in the mental game.
Now, as we know, so much of athletic performance is reliant on team performance. In your recent interview on the Basketpedia podcast with Mark Hart, you talked about spreading positivity among teams. Mm-hmm. So, in your opinion, what's the best way that a coach can spread positivity and, as you said, turn the volume down on negativity within their team?
For sure. Well, first, what I always like to say is, there's a difference between negativity and negative thoughts, okay? And sometimes we get them confused, but negative thoughts are actually very, very, very normal. So if you're listening to this right now and you're thinking, I sometimes have negative thoughts, or how often have negative thoughts, I'm here to tell you that there's certainly nothing wrong with you, and it actually just means that you're human. It's what we do. It's actually how we're wired. We're hardwired to have a negative bias that's been passed down from our ancestors, keeps us safe. And naturally we scan for danger, or things we should be fearful of. But again, it's a great thing because it keeps us safe, and it's that fight or flight term that you may have heard before. But it can be hurtful at times to our performance because we're scanning for all this negativity, and we're scanning for things that are appearing to be dangerous that may not even be dangerous at all. And it can really get in the way of us being at our best. So put simply, getting negative thoughts is very, very normal, but it's what you're going to do with the negative thought that matters. And this stems into negativity, and I'll kind of get there. But, one thing I like to say, Jacob, is, our mind will find what it was looking for. And I think I said this story on the Basketpedia podcast of, I was car shopping at one point, and it was a Jeep Rubicon that I was looking at, and I really wanted to buy this car, and once I left the dealership, the one car I suddenly began to see everywhere was a Jeep Rubicon. So it's just so funny. It's a tangible reminder here of I'm sure everybody listening has been there at some point of when you're thinking about something, you start to begin to see a lot more of it. And that's really just a representation of our mind will find what it's looking for. So it's so easy to find negative things around us. And really what that's going to do is fill your mind with frustration, doubt, fear, anxieties. What we do know is negativity works negatively, usually 100% of the time. Okay. And it spreads like wildfires all the way around. So like you said, how do we turn the volume down on the negative and the unproductive? Well, you really have to, it's kind of, you're at war here. You got to combat this by focusing on the good, focusing on the productive, and what's going to help me right now in my performance. The things that you're grateful for. Some days you might wake up and the day just kind of sucks, but you still have your health. You've got something. If you're breathing, you're blessed in some way. Okay. So, it's really making the decision, like, am I going to see the opportunity here, or am I going to see the obstacle? Or am I going to see the problem, or am I going to see the possibility? So we have these choices, and we're being pulled both ways. So that's why you really have to have this awareness, and you have to be really intentional of flexing those optimistic muscles that we have. Okay. So, but through that's really where we can find joy, happiness, strength in adversity, strength when tough things come, like COVID. And certainly I don't want to demean what COVID is, and it's terrible and absolutely heartbreaking in so many ways. But are we going to dwell on that, or are we going to pivot, adjust, and figure out what's good here, or what could be good here, and how we're going to make this situation good? And that starts with us. So again, practically, like, how do we put this into our own life? So many people think, well, I don't want to be positive all the time. That's okay. You don't always have to go to that positive place. Sometimes, like Trevor Moawad, he's the mental performance consultant for Russell Wilson. He says, we can go to a neutral base. If positivity isn't working for you that day, maybe go to a neutral base, where it's like truth-based, just seeing the situation for what it is, rather than going to such a negative place all the time. Because again, we get in a spiral and it really brings us down. So again, it's toying with positivity, but also like what's productive here, and maybe a little bit of neutral. Again, it doesn't always have to be fluffy, and positivity, people always think it's like fluffy, not necessarily, and it doesn't have to be that way. But I think, you have to wake up with a decision. Like, you have to choose to be optimistic and have an optimistic outlook for the day, despite your circumstances. And that's really what someone who's mentally tough does. they're optimistic, and they believe that good things can come or will come. And it kind of, we talk to ourselves a lot. We've got an internal voice, and this is really important because what we think about determines how we feel, and that determines how we perform. So I said that earlier in our podcast. That's sports psychology 101. Like, what we think about influences how we perform. So what goes on up here is essential. So are we gonna keep it negative, or are we gonna combat that with something more productive, more optimistic, and more positive? So I think where it really begins is just having the awareness, and really making the decision. All right, I'm having this negative thought. It's really normal, but I'm not going to let the negative thought take me somewhere. I'm going to talk back to that thought and challenge it with a more optimistic view, a more productive view, a more positive view. So I think it really just begins with challenging. Obviously, you have to have the awareness. You don't know. You can't grow unless you don't know. And then challenging the thought with something more productive to what you're doing, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. And another important item that you talked about on that podcast was goal setting. So what do you think is more important in goal setting? Having a final outcome goal to achieve, or creating small individual goals daily?
Oh, I appreciate that question, because certainly both are important. I think having an outcome goal is very important, because that's having that long-term vision of, this is where I want to be, this is what I want to get. But that can be tricky if we're just focused on that outcome goal, and I'll explain why. So to answer your question, first and foremost, I think the small individual daily goals are the most important. And I'm sure that everybody watching or listening to this has thought about goals at some point, or set out to accomplish some goals, set some goals for themselves. And someone once told me, really what you spend your time thinking about often happens. So there's so many stories too where I know this to be true, and I've witnessed it in my own life. So I would ask you and people listening, like, what are you thinking about? Are you thinking about accomplishing something great? Or are you thinking about yourself constantly falling short or failing? So I think first, like we talked about, that outcome goal is important, because you got to get clear on your vision. Where do you want to go? In my work with athletes, I often challenge them, strive for something that scares you just a little bit, because a lot of growth comes from some discomfort. Okay, because it means you're challenging yourself and you're getting better. You're able to fail and learn from your failures and be better. And I think I quoted this too, like there was a Harvard researcher that said, we should have about 50 to 70% chance of achieving our big goals. That's really the sweet spot for high achievers, because then again, like I said, when you fail half the time, you can figure out what you should do differently and try again, because that's practice. Those are those reps. You know what I mean? So again, you got to have a vision. So that's that outcome goal. But what's more important is what happens along the way. And that's where people who set goals for themselves, sometimes they don't achieve their goals. Oftentimes they don't achieve their goals because they don't set the small daily goals that they need in order, we call them process goals, those small daily goals in order to get to that expected outcome, or where they want to go, or the vision that they have for themselves. So that's where it gets really tricky with goal setting, is often people aren't told, like, hey, let's break it down by the day. Let's break it down by the week of what you need to do in order to get where you want to go. So that's why it's more important. You got to make those detailed and so specific. So in my work with performers, I say it's a process and it's a journey to our goals. It certainly doesn't happen overnight. That's why they're goals. But it's really not helpful to our process to focus just on that outcome, because, we can focus on that outcome, but what are you doing on the daily to get there? Because that's not going to happen overnight, and nor is that going to happen without some sort of work. You know what I mean? So I ask them, let's get really specific here. What do you need to do each day to get you closer to where you want to be? And for some performers, we break it down to the hour, because they need that, and that's okay. And then I think part of the formula with goal setting is, you got to write them down and you got to say them out loud. And this is my favorite story because this just represents it so well of like, how many times have you gone to the grocery store, Jacob, or Target or something without a list of what you needed? I'm sure we all, like I did it the other day. And almost always you come out with the one thing that you really needed, like the one thing that sent you to the store in the first place. Like, have you ever done that?
Yes, I did that last week.
Right. It's the best
Yep.
example. And it's just this reminder of, you know, our goals are so similar. Like if we don't write them down and say them out loud, we often forget about where we're trying to go or what we need to do to get there. So like me at the grocery store, I get so distracted by all the different aisles that, you know, I'm forgetting why I went to the grocery store. And same goes for goals. If we're not writing them down and we're not seeing them on a daily basis or having them as a tangible reminder of, okay, this is what I want, this is where I want to go, this is what I want to do, you know, we can get so distracted by the stuff along the way that we're just totally off balance and we're not even making progress towards our goal. So it's very, very similar. So writing them down is essential. And I like saying them out loud because you hold yourself accountable in a sense. And there's been times where I've said some of my goals out loud and I'm really scared to do so because I don't know if I can quite achieve that goal. But just by saying it out loud, I'm almost mentally like holding myself more accountable, and I'm more willing to push myself outside of my comfort zone because I admitted it out loud. Does that make sense? So finally, the last thing I always like to say too about, you know, goals is like, you can't forget to adjust your goals sometimes. Sometimes you have to pivot and make changes because we're always growing. We're always getting better. So, you know, your goals are the same way. They've got to grow with you and they're going to need some adjusting. But this little method can really help hold you more accountable toward your goals and help you with those, I like to say, marginal gains. So like we want to be 1% better each day. Make sure you're just getting 1% better each day and you're going to be more likely to achieve your goal. Really, you got to fall in love with the process and be faithful to this daily process to get to your goals. So that's why I think the outcome goals are just so crucial, is because it's that day, it's today, tomorrow, the next, you know, it's an addition problem to get you to where you want to go. So the process is just so much more important than just where you want to go. You know what I mean? So I'm going to go with that one for that question.
Well, Sarah, this was great. Before we go, where can our audience find you on social media?
They can find me on Twitter and on Instagram. I believe I'm at Sarah J. Chaffee, which is Sarah, Sarah, J, and Chaffee, Chaffee. Thanks, Jacob. You're the best.
Sarah, thank you again for joining me. We're going to throw to a commercial, but we'll be right back.